Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Fighter Flourish's webinar on processes, lessons, and impacts. My name is Bryony Rogers, and I'm the CEO of Fighter Flourish and a Professor of Systems Change at Monash University. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that wherever we're joining this webinar from, we're on unceded lands of First Nations people. I'm on Bunurong country in the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people joining us today across Australia. And I'd particularly like to extend my gratitude to the First Nations colleagues, advisors, and friends who are an integral part of Fighter Flourish. Many of you might know that foregrounding Aboriginal wisdom is one of our guiding principles. In practice, that means seeking to involve Aboriginal people in all our work, learning from Aboriginal ways of knowing and being and doing, prioritising outcomes for Aboriginal people, and particularly honouring the remarkable leadership of Aboriginal people in community and for disaster resilience everywhere. I thank our program's First Nations leaders and guides for their generosity, patience, and wisdom. And I also acknowledge the leadership of First Nations people all around the world as we collectively come to grips with what it takes to live well with the impacts of climate change and to reset our deep understanding of connection to country, culture, and community. Fighter Flourish is at the midpoint of our 3 years of active delivery with our 4 partner communities. We've done a lot, we've learnt a lot, and we've had many people and organisations interested in the journey that we're on. So this webinar is an opportunity to share some insights from our work to date. Over the next hour and a half, we'll have a short video to play. I'll be sharing some highlights from 2 program reports that we're pleased to launch today. And then we'll have a panel discussion with some of our community and research team members. But first, I'm delighted to introduce you to Senator Tony Sheldon. Senator Sheldon is a senator for New South Wales in the Commonwealth Government, the Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery, and the Deputy Chair of the Select Committee on Australia's Disaster Resilience. In these roles, Senator Sheldon has had the opportunity to meet many communities recovering from disaster and thinking about their disaster resilience into the future. So I'm delighted now to welcome Senator Sheldon to provide some opening remarks.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Bryony, and it's great to join you all on this online forum, and I'm really wishing you the best for today. And I also just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land which we are meeting on, and as we dial in from across Australia, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also just mention that we had just a wonderful opportunity to talk to some wonderful elders and leaders in the Aboriginal community in the Gippsland the last couple of days, which I'm looking forward to follow-up conversations in the next couple of months as well when I travel back out to the Gippsland. But I want to thank Fire to Flourish and team for organising today's webinar, and to everyone who's joining us online from around Australia, including from those community groups, volunteer organisations and not-for-profits and state-based services. We acknowledge your very valuable contributions towards our community resilience building. It's essential that we're all working together and sharing those experiences, and I'm very much looking forward to your responses today and how the webinar has gone. Now, the essential work you do on helping communities prepare for and respond to disasters while supporting social cohesion and fostering positive connections is so important, and the Fighter Flourish 5-year program, working in partnership with the 4 bushfire-affected communities in Clarence Valley, Tenterfield, Eurobodalla, New South Wales, and East Gippsland of Victoria, where I've, as I've mentioned, have been over there over the past week, speaking to community members about how recovery is progressing following the Black Summer bushfires and subsequent storms and floods, of course, that have ravaged the area. Whilst I was in Gippsland, I heard from some amazing work that Fighter Flourish is doing on the ground. Particularly impressed with that work on the 12 women group that's been brought together, building the resilience of local communities and creating social capital across the region. And of course, today's webinar is an important opportunity to check in as we approach the midpoint of Fighter Flourish's community activation work and to learn about the key findings so far. Now, before I hand over the team, I just want to talk about the reports that are launching today, and I will just first provide a short overview of what the Australian government has been doing to ensure that Australia is better prepared but natural hazards that become humanitarian disasters. As Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery, I work with the Minister for Emergency Management to engage across all levels of government and community groups. Recently, I've visited communities in the Northern Rivers in New South Wales, all the way up to Wudjil in far north Queensland, and all the way over to Fitzroy Crossing in Western Australia. I've seen firsthand the trauma created by compounding disasters and emergencies. The last few years, of course, have seen Australians face some of the worst natural disasters in living memory. And recovery will take, of course, many years. Now, in the past 6 months alone, there's been 44 natural disasters which have been declared across Australia. Over 190 local government areas were impacted, including 60 areas more than once. Of course, that puts a huge strain on systems across the country. Now, in response to these challenges, the Australian government's setting the foundations for a more secure, stronger, and safer country by investing in the capabilities, data and information, and partnerships we need to strengthen our resilience. We are focused on what we all know is fundamental to emergency management, supporting Australian communities before, during, and absolutely after disasters. Now, since 2022, we've established the Disaster Ready Fund, providing $1 billion over 5 years for natural disaster resilience and risk reduction projects. Of course, we've established the National Emergency Management Stockpile to boost state and territory resources. I've funded the veteran-led Disaster Relief Australia to provide suitable, trained, boots-on-the-ground volunteers to help communities clean up. We've responded to all the federal recommendations from the Royal Commission into national natural disaster arrangements, including enhancing, very recently, the Australian National Aerial Capability. Now, of course, we've established the National Emergency Management Agency and addressed previously ad hoc funding to secure it as an enduring part of the emergency management landscape. So the National Emergency Management Agency has ongoing funding for its future endeavours. We've conducted the first National Disaster Preparedness Summit, bringing together both governments, the private and not-for-profit sectors in advance of the high-risk weather season. Into the future, we will continue providing disaster relief funding through the joint Commonwealth State Disaster Recovery Funding Arrangements and Australian government payments for individuals and small businesses. We've established a national messaging system, so no matter where you are or what language you speak, you'll receive emergency warnings. And these are things that we're preparing and developing further into the future. So we're also updating, as part of that future plan, the public sector mobile broadband system, advancing work that's been put aside for over a decade to improve interoperability of communications for emergency service workers. We're working with insurers through the Hazards Insurance Partnership to problem solve how we can make hazards insurance more accessible and affordable, and improving flood gauges through the Flood Warning Infrastructure Network, ensuring that most at-risk regions have access to timely information. Now, like all the investments of this ambition and size, these reforms will take time and will be challenging, but the results are absolutely worth it. We're seeing some of those results right now. Now, as everyone on this call knows, we get the best outcomes for communities when recovery and risk reduction is community-led, state coordinated, and federally facilitated. Primary aim of Fire to Flourish program is to pilot a new model of holistic support for inclusive, community-led approaches to building disaster resilience. And I strongly, believe that sort of approach has so much merit and sustainability. That builds real resilience. And of course, this also means lots of experimentation to develop new methods and tools that support community-led action. And during my visits to disaster-impacted regions, I've been struck by the innovation of local communities and the many positive examples of community-led action that are helping to build resilience across the country. Now, I'm always on the lookout for good examples of community and led approaches, so local projects that can be evaluated, scaled up and replicated elsewhere. Projects like the Adelaide Hills Community Resilience Team, which has increasing community capacity, leadership and sustainability to bushfire events, and was recognised at the South Australian Resilient Australia Awards. The Young Change Agents Schools program in the Northern Rivers that empowered flood-impacted youth when they needed it most, giving them back some control and helping them to make a difference in their community. And the program run by the Fitzroy River Bridge Alliance that helped develop the skills and experience of 150 local Aboriginal workers employed on the construction of the new bridge, building local opportunities and capacity. Now, I know that the team at Fire to Flourish shares the focus on influencing system changes to support the spreading and scaling of insights from projects for the benefit of Australian communities, as well as wrapping around research and evaluation around community processes to build an evidence-based base about what works for community disaster resilience. Now, I look forward to learning more about the Fire to Flourish's key findings so far and hearing about what is next from your discussions today, including how we can continue to best support risk reduction projects that have been designed at the local level to improve disaster resilience and preparedness. If we can collectively adapt to a changing climate, strengthen our support systems, reduce our risk, we can live in differently and build a better future for all Australians. Now, I really want to thank Lara and the team and at Fire to Flourish. The processes, lessons, and impacts that you've taken to the community so far have just been so wonderful. I'm really looking forward to how you go today, and very best for today. And thank you for the time of having a conversation, a bit of a chat.
Thanks so much, Senator. It's wonderful to hear about the really holistic approach that the federal government's taking to thinking about how to best support communities, and also for your personal commitment, having been on the ground, and that genuine empathy, care, and connection that you have in supporting communities. So, thank you for your kind remarks and your insightful comments, and we look forward to continuing to work with you going forward. So listening to community voices and stories is a key part of Fire to Flourish. So we thought we would start with sharing one of the stories of one of our community leads, Helen Giroux in Tenterfield, to give you a bit of a sense of our working community.
Disaster strikes, you on the ground, you see people who've lost everything. They're in shock. They might have lost family, they've lost their homes. They don't know what happens next. And that's a really critical part to recognise how we then can support those communities to move into the recovery. One of the things that's really important to think through is for many of those communities that have been affected by the disasters, it goes on for years. It could be 15, 20 years. Things will trigger them to have a reaction when it's a hot day or floods. And so we need to know that this is not a short-term fix in supporting communities. It's a much longer support. And that's why having the communities at the centre of the response to figure out what's important for them means that they're living in those communities and they will be part of the future.
When the fires came towards us in 2019, I was sitting out front of my sister's house. We were watching the glow in the sky get brighter and brighter, and we knew the fire was getting closer. And all we could think about was, where do we go? Because there was fires all around us and there was no way out. So we just decided we'd probably head for the nearest big water hole and sit in the middle of that. It was an awful time. It was really very traumatising. The realisation that we could possibly end up with nothing and have to restart our lives with absolutely nothing the way I grew up. I never resented growing up with nothing, but I've worked hard all my life to have everything I've got, and then I thought, bloody fire's going to take it off me. When you think about it in that regard, it's totally devastating. I'm Helen Giroux. I'm a very very proud and staunch Kamilaroi woman. I've lived here in Tenterfield and worked here for most of my life. And I'm the community lead for Tenterfield Fire to Flourish program. It was really hard to drive around after the fires and look at everything. And it wasn't just scorched, it was totally burnt black. There were burnt leaves on people's lawns, on my lawn. I couldn't believe that I walked out and found burnt leaves and I was miles away from the fire. When the country is devastated as it has been, you feel it inside yourself as an Aboriginal person and it devastates you personally. Country does need fire, but it needs the right kind of fire. The relationship that you have to have with the land is you have to know it intimately, like the Aboriginal people in years past knew how to care for country by fire and with fire. With our Fire to Flourish funding, we are working on some resources to enable the whole of community to be able to utilise the skills that our old people used for years to look after country. The aftermath of the fires, it was very traumatising to the whole of the community. Fire to Flourish was more prepared than anyone to manage our rapid response grants. The people on the ground who have been impacted are the ones who are deciding what's needed, and that's where the money's going. It starts with the people on the ground that know what happened, know what the impacts were, and know what's needed to make it better for next time. Fire to Flourish has proven itself as a necessary part of this community. We're local people, our team's local, we're here on the ground. We know properties, we know farmers. We brought all those networks together through Fire to Flourish. So what we actually did was strengthen our community. When we walked through the bush after the fires, the ash was still really thick on the ground. And then to come across the growth, the new growth that was coming through those thick ashes and realising that those plants were regenerating themselves after they'd been devastated. Just to witness that was amazing. Created so much joy inside of me. It made me feel really well, wonderful.
There is really strong evidence that communities that are leading their own recovery recover better and recover faster. They can tailor the solutions for their unique place and their unique context and problems. It's really critical that communities are leading their own recovery and resilience building. They have the local knowledge, the lived experience, and the connection with place that means their vision should be guiding how recovery is done. And every community is different. There can't be a one-size-fits-all model here. We need to be able to tailor support and tailor solutions for what works for local place and local people and local culture. And that's why Fire to Flourish started. We set out to try new ways of working with community, to provide them with the support that work for them, to truly unlock community power and agency so that they can be leading their recovery work, to figure out what it needs to look like for communities to truly feel empowered and supported to lead their own recovery and their long-term resilience building.
I love hearing bits of Helen's story. She's an amazing leader in the program, and we deeply value not only her leadership in the Tenterfield team, but the cultural leadership and insight and wisdom that she's bringing to all of us. So thank you, Helen. I'm now going to share my screen and give you some highlights of the 2 reports that we are thrilled to be launching today. Has that come up okay?
So we are very proud to be launching two major program reports at this event. One is our 2023 impact report, which articulates the impacts that we've observed and heard about after our first full year of community activity in 2023. And the other is our lessons report, which sets out the lessons we've learned as a program during these first years of establishment and co-design work in partnership with communities. But first, a little bit about our process as a program. So we emerged 4 years ago in the aftermath of the devastating 2019-2020 bushfires. There was widespread recognition in that aftermath that business as usual approaches to disaster recovery weren't serving the people and communities that were hit the hardest. And with the many disasters that have happened since, we're constantly reminded that it's everyday Australians that are actually the first responders when disaster strikes, and also the last responders there for the years and years afterwards when recovery is ongoing. But we're not yet systematically resourcing communities with adequate support to navigate the long-term impacts of disaster and to do that leadership work on the ground in the recovery building, and also thinking about preparedness and readiness for the next disaster. So with cornerstone funding from our philanthropic partners, including the Paul Ramsay Foundation, we had an opportunity to experiment with new approaches to address this gap with long-term and flexible funding that's allowing us to try new things, take risks, and co-design solutions in true partnership with community. We set out to trial innovations in community-led resilience that bridge the gap between hyper-local realities and government-led responses. And in doing that, to understand and influence the system conditions that can enable these sorts of approaches to be taken up across Australia. The program's led by Monash University, which means we have the opportunity to weave research through this community impact work so that we can be systematic about learning about what works, evidencing the outcomes that are achieved, and also developing the toolkits that can codify this knowledge to support other communities in replicating this model and scaling. So what does it look like in practice? Well, it looks different in each of our partner communities. We're working in 4 communities, 3 in New South Wales, Clarence Valley, Tenterfield and Eurobodalla, and 1 in Victoria in East Gippsland. And each of these local government areas were severely affected by the 2019-20 fires. They've all got sizable populations in the lowest decile of the CEFA index of socioeconomic disadvantage, and they all have an Aboriginal population higher than the national average. And of course, it's not new insight, but every community is unique. So we work with our local teams to tailor the program's implementation for their context. But in essence, across each of the communities, Fire to Flourish is funding local community members to do that critical work of connecting, brokering, facilitating, bringing people and organisations from their community together to think deeply about lived experiences, their community as a system, their visions for the future. And through this very participatory work, communities are collectively identifying recovery and resilience priorities, collaboratively developing project ideas that address both short-term recovery needs, but also longer-term transformative opportunities. And then the communities decide how they want to allocate flexible grant funding that's available through the program to bring these projects to life. And across all of these activities, we have a focus on strengthening community networks, growing capabilities, the critical ingredients that support social cohesion and social capital, because we know that that is the most important part of community disaster resilience. So we have a 5-year program in total, and we are 3.5 years in. And the first couple of years, was really the foundation laying both as a program, but also in communities, building that trust, local relationships, building up the local representation to lead the delivery of the program. At the end of 2023, which is the timeframe for both of these 2 reports, we had $4.2 million allocated in community granting and 49 community projects funded across 8 different processes, participatory process rounds that the community teams led on the ground. So looking across the work that we've done, and particularly focusing on 2023 as our first full year of community-led activity, we've thought it was important to get a sense already of what impacts are the communities seeing on the ground as a result of this sort of model. Our research and to evidence the impacts of the program is ongoing. But at the end of last year, we asked our partner communities, what impacts are you already observing and experiencing as a result of the work on the ground? We spoke to people who'd been closely involved in the program, either as staff members, co-designers, grant recipients, and we also did a pulse check survey in the wider community to hear their self-reported insights. So our impact report shares these findings for each community, and we were delighted to see that positive impacts are being experienced across the board. Our impacts have been particularly strong in the domains of social capital and culture, which is where much of our emphasis in the first year of activity has been, with participatory processes and community network events, all designed to strengthen connections with diverse parts of the community, bringing diverse cohorts together and so on. So our report focuses on the local impacts that we're observing, but I'll also highlight two key national impacts, national impact initiatives that we've catalysed. We've launched the National Indigenous Disaster Resilience Program last year, and this was in response to recognising the critical evidence gaps and policy gaps that we have around the disaster resilience of Indigenous communities in particular. And so this is a research-led program to fill those evidence gaps and advance a national policy agenda and community of practice to really improve and strengthen how we support Indigenous disaster resilience. And the other key national impact initiative that we've launched is the DisasterWise Communities Network, a new social infrastructure that enables community leaders to directly connect, learn and change with each other. And so there's all kinds of networks that already exist, policy networks and practitioner networks, but before DisasterWise, there wasn't that network specifically and dedicated for communities to do that connecting together. So DisasterWise is going from strength to strength. Its membership continues to expand and it's preparing to spin out as an independent entity. So to come back to some of our local impact examples, Fire to Flourish has a really holistic approach to thinking about resilience, recognising that resilience emerges from a community when there's strength across social, economic, cultural, health and well-being, built environment, natural environment features. And so we felt it was really important to be able to look holistically through that those 6 domains when thinking about our impact. In terms of social impact, what we've heard from communities is that the processes of community engagement, governance, capability building, those processes brought people together around a shared vision for disaster resilience and broader community flourishing, and that's strengthening leadership on the ground and it's strengthening social cohesion. 2 of our communities in Tenterfield and Clarence Valley were unfortunately struck again last year by a bushfire. And what we heard from those communities was that their recovery was faster and more effective because the work beforehand had strengthened the connections that led to better coordination of a community-wide response. And we were also able to provide some rapid financial relief that met critical but unmet needs of individuals and the broader community. For example, providing drinking water, which had no other way of getting serviced, and providing temporary fencing to contain cattle that were going to be let loose in the region. We've also heard that we're supporting the advancement of reconciliation in our partner communities. We've heard that the events, projects and participatory processes that we're leading have strengthened the community's understanding and appreciation of Aboriginal culture and promoted the coming together of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in community. We've heard that people's wellbeing is being improved through engagement processes that create safe space for story sharing and healing, strengthening social connections, facilitating creative arts, and increasing people's sense of power and agency in relation to disasters. Our Clarence Valley team in particular did some deep placemaking work with their communities, supported by Monash's art design and architecture faculty, students and team. And they developed community-led master plans and concept designs for community infrastructure and public amenities that reflected community visions, priorities and ideas for rebuilding and strengthening their sense of place and resilience for disaster. And communities have chosen to invest in many different projects through their grant funding that have a focus on land regeneration, reducing bushfire risk, like native tree replanting, waste management, and emergency communications. So that's the impact report. Coming to our lessons report, we have learned a lot in doing this work, and it's been a really important principle of ours to learn, adapt, and evolve, recognising that this is a new space that we're collectively around Australia leading into. How do we reimagine the way that community leadership and action can be truly empowered and supported? We are fortunate to have an in-house developmental evaluation team, Professor Annetta Boss and Dr. Inara Walden, who come alongside all of our activities to support reflection and learning as we go. And they've supported us to look back across our first phases of work as a program, establishing our program foundations, growing community relationships, co-designing local implementation, and doing the groundwork that sets us up for thinking about scale and systems change. So these lessons are consolidated in our lessons report, which we're really delighted to launch today. There's many insights that are shared, and we've consolidated that and synthesized that, I guess, into 5 key lessons that are really mutually reinforcing. And taken as a package, I think provide pretty important guidance for funders, governments, and program designers when thinking about initiating community-based programs of work, certainly within the disaster resilience context, but also beyond. So to bring them to life a little bit, first, invest in year 0. Transformative work with communities requires really strong foundations. We need to ensure alignment among diverse program partners. There needs to be a clear vision and design. There needs to be strong governance and so on. And of course, a year 0 is important for building the strong foundation for work in and with community itself. So identifying community partners, developing the local relationships, gaining the contextual insights that are going to support that tailoring work, and providing the training and any other sort of scaffolding or setup that's needed to support that community-led work on the ground. For Fire to Flourish, we found that we needed about 10% of our total program budget in this foundational work, which might seem a lot, but what that does is it sets those foundations for really accelerated impact into the future. And I think critically, making sure that the milestones and expectations for that year 0 align with setting strong enabling conditions, rather than the prescriptive community-based deliverables, which will come, but will need to come on that strong foundational base. And that investment will ensure smoother implementation and greater impact into the following years. Second, lasting change needs long-term funding. Across all our engagement, we've heard that short-term funding is really problematic for community-based initiatives. It reduces the likelihood that the impact will be lasting, and it risks re-traumatisation of communities with unreliable, sporadic, and sometimes disempowering forms of support. Sustainable financial investment is critical for enabling transformative community changes. We need to be able to invest and resource the social fabric of communities, the networks, the capability building. And this sort of approach can fundamentally transform how communities are preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disasters. We've heard from our partner communities that our program's timeframe is unusual and very welcome. And even so, it still feels like, from their perspective, that by the end of the program, they'll only just be getting started in terms of unlocking their community's full potential. 3, move at the pace of trust. Trust-based relationships with communities, partners, and other stakeholders is everything. Again, this requires significant upfront investment of time, deep listening to community experiences and priorities, and in turn, ensuring that communities feel ownership and commitment to the program. And of course, you need the long-term funding for this. And what one community might be able to achieve in 6 months might take another community 2 years, and that's fine. But there needs to be the space and the flexibility and the responsiveness of a program to be able to support that moving at the pace of trust between the central program and the communities, and trust between the local community representatives and their wider community. And we need to be guided about what feels right in terms of the relationships on the ground. For Fire to Flourish, that trust and reciprocity have also been particularly critical in bringing research expertise together with the lived expertise of community members so that we can be generating new knowledge together. And so investment in time and relationships and ultimately trust is key. Community customisation. We have needed to be highly adaptable in implementing Fire to Flourish's approaches, whether that's tailoring how we recruit local staff, adjusting our language in our communications, designing and implementing program activities to suit the community preferences and contexts. And that, of course, means that Fire to Flourish isn't this one-size-fits-all model with core, but there's core components that need to be implemented flexibly in each community. We found that this process of community customisation has been well supported by our guiding principles. These were collaboratively developed early on, being community-led, foregrounding Aboriginal wisdom, being strengths-based and trauma-informed, focusing on systemic inequities and enhancing inclusion, being holistic in our impact, learning, adapting and evolving. They became the guardrails to help us be aligned in how we guide the program delivery while still accommodating local dynamics and preferences. And we also found that we needed to find the right balance between flexibility and tailoring to community needs on the one hand, but also providing that strong principles and effective governance and responsive support on the other, so that there's clarity and safety for people to be able to work with confidence in tailoring activities on the ground for their local settings. And finally, resourcing for community self-determination. We know that local knowledge and lived experience means communities are best positioned to make decisions about their local place, but unlocking this full capacity requires resourcing. Direct investment in community leadership, networks, capability is all needed to build community agency and self-determination. For us, that's been through employment and training of local leaders, funding mechanisms that elevate community voice, and embedding community power in the system of our program, and flexible granting that provides funds for community priorities and projects. This hyperlocal capacity is a powerful source of innovation and it needs to be funded to support long-term community resilience. So this has just been a short overview of what you can read about in our 2 reports. And we really welcome ongoing discussion and ideas over the coming weeks and months as our work and that of many other organisations that are really advancing practice in community-led disaster resilience building comes together and starts to create the future systems that we know are needed. I will take a moment to thank our program partners, including our funders, the Paul Ramsay Foundation and metal manufacturers, our many delivery partners on the ground, of course, our partner communities and our wonderful program team for all their amazing contributions. I hope you enjoy reading our reports. And now it's time to hear for some of the people that are leading the work on the ground. And so I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lara Werbeloff. She's part of the Fire to Flourish Executive, the director of our engagement, communications and strategy and development portfolio, who's going to lead us off in a panel discussion.
Thanks, Bryony. So yeah, as Bryony mentioned, my name's Lara Werbeloff. I am the Director of Strategy, Engagement and Development here at Fire to Flourish. I'm joining this morning from Wurundjeri country. I've been part of this leadership team of the Fire to Flourish program from the very beginning, and it's really such an exciting moment for us to be at this stage and able to share some of our impacts and lessons from our work over the last years. So it's my honour today to moderate this panel conversation with some of the program staff from different parts of the program and different communities. So on our panel today, we are joined by Kizzy Nye, who is a proud Walbunja woman from Mogo on the New South Wales South Coast. Kizzy worked for over 25 years for the New South Wales Education Department as an Aboriginal Education Officer at the Mogo Public School, and has really dedicated her life to education and teaching the importance of practicing culture to the younger generation. Kizzy brings a lived experience of the catastrophic 2019-2020 bushfires and is currently the Fire to Flourish community lead in Eurobodalla. Pamela Denise is a professional artist based in the Nimboida, Northern Rivers, New South Wales. Pamela has been living in Nimboida for over 30 years and is deeply embedded in the community. She too was part of a self-mobilised Nimboida recovery team in response to the 2019 firestorm. Pamela joined Fire to Flourish as a co-designer in our Clarence Valley pilot program in 2021 and is now a community facilitator in the Clarence Valley. And finally, we have Dr. Adriana Keating, who is a disaster resilience researcher who's been with Fire to Flourish since the beginning of 2022. Adriana's passion is working with communities and agencies to help put communities where they should be, which is in the lead. In Fire to Flourish, she's been particularly working with the Tenfield team over the last years. So before we get started, a reminder that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screens. Please drop any questions that you might have for our panel in there. We'll have some time to address some questions at the end of this discussion. So perhaps to kick us off, Kizzy, Pamela and Adriana, I might ask each of you to share a moment of impact that really stands out to you in your work in Fire to Flourish over the last number of years. And maybe, Kizzy, should we start with you?
Yep, that's fine. Thanks, Lara. I think an impact that has really been highlighted in the era of Badella is that Fire to Flourish has helped to build social capital. I think it's so important for community to be given a voice, and that's critical to build that social capital. We've got to have projects from one end of our LGA to the other, and we've had the opportunity to be able to create, I think, long-lasting friendships and relationships across the Shire where people would never otherwise have had the opportunity to meet. And for this, the project being delivered differently has been really accepted well within the community. And we had a meeting of some grant recipients recently, and to be able to see the social capital that was just happening within the room in that space in real time was absolutely amazing. We had cultural practitioners, people from school communities, a community project that we had funded, and to see the connections that those people made just within that room within an hour time period was absolutely amazing. And to think that they would have taken those conversations and built relationships, you know, it was really heartwarming to see. So for the community to be the decision makers and the leaders of those projects, I think has been really vital to helping to build that social capital. And to be able to have the opportunity to ask community what they need, pardon me, and not tell them, the option for that is received differently. And it builds confidence and trust and capabilities, not just within Fire to Flourish, but within those projects, which then builds those capabilities within the community. And we've seen, everybody's seen that services come into this space and dictate what happens with the funds. They hold events that hardly anybody shows up to. If you give these opportunities to people in community, they become the leaders in their own recovery, and they show up. And not only do they show up, but they bring their friends and their families with them, and the word is spread, and it creates a beautiful event.
Yeah, thanks, Kizzy. Powerful reflection about the, I suppose, the engagement you get when communities are determining what it is they're wanting to do in their own place. Maybe Pamela, a key moment of impact for you that stands out. You are on mute, Pamela.
Am I I'm unmuted? Very good. Yeah, so here in Nimboida in 2019, massive severe firestorm, and one of the resulting things was a movement of a significant number of our community. Probably half of them moved out, and then people moved in. And so one of the really big impacts, there's been many impacts Fire to Flourish has had here in Nimboida, but one of them has been enabling the community to get to know each other because of the different Fire to Flourish activities that we've been doing, so that the new people, I get sort of getting to know the older people and the old hands a little bit quicker than if nothing had been happening at all. And the result of that is when we had, because people are paying attention, people are paying attention to their environment and the consequences of living in bushlands. And because the devastation in 2019 was so extreme, that's why half of the people moved out. The other people that have moved in are deeply concerned about what they've moved into. So it's been easier to have conversations with those who've just chosen to stay as to why they would do so. And the impact of that was when we had that emergency fire that went for 10 days last October, we were able to self-mobilize so quickly and so fluently because we knew people. Whereas traditionally, and I've been living here for over 30 years, it's quite easy for you not to know people that live a couple of doors down. You could meet them at the hall and you'd say, oh, how long have you been here? And they'd say 10 years. Whereas that doesn't quite happen now. So the impact of the activity of Fire to Flourish has been assisting us. And because we're the ones doing it, as opposed to some outside agencies coming and saying, you need to be talking to each other, you need to know your neighbours, you need to do this and you need to do that. That hasn't been the conversation. That's not how it's been handled. We've customised it to ourselves and taken the opportunity that Fire to Flourish has given us to have those conversations. It's a very subtle nuance. But it's absolutely critical to get the sort of thing that we had happen last October, where we had people moved out of the way of a 4-kilometre stretch where the fire was travelling just so very, very fast. 20 minutes warning, 10 minutes warning, people were being told to look out their window. It's there, it's on them, and we didn't lose anybody. And then the response of the services was huge. And then we were able to keep track of each other and support each other. And we were supported by outside agencies. And all of this happened because of the fluency, because of our connection that Kizzy's talking about. Sorry, it's probably a little bit of a garbled. There's so much to say. It's such a broad, big thing. Phenomena. It's a phenomena. We became an organism. Yeah, it was wonderful and terrific. I don't particularly need to relive it soon, but we need to be ready for the next time.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
And yeah, really mindful. So you're talking about, traumatic events that have happened in the very recent past, yourself and Kizzy both. They're quite, really appreciate your honesty and bravery in kind of sharing that. And we'll maybe dive deeper into some of those insights as the conversation unfolds. Adriana, a key moment of impact that strikes you.
Thanks so much, Lara. Look, there's a lot, and so it was hard to choose one, but I want to talk about a key moment of impact for me that's very live at the moment, because I am coming to you from Tenterfield, which is one of the Fire to Flourish focus communities. And in end of October, start of November last year in 2023, the community experienced quite a severe firestorm event. And following that event, we did Fire to Flourish, facilitated some rapid response grants, which were very successful. But one of the other things that happened after that event was that we were approached by a number of community members who requested that we support them in learning some lessons about what worked well and what didn't work well and needs improvement in terms of the community's preparedness, response, and recovery. And so for me, having that request come through from the community members really demonstrated the trust and the relationships that have been built over the last few years, led by Auntie Helen. So we've been working in Tenterfield for a number of years, brought a fantastic group of co-designers together to think about their disaster resilience, their future, what they want, and identify priorities. Do the project design, the project selection and design. And then when this event happened, there was that trust that Fire to Flourish is not going to come in and tell you what you did wrong. Fire to Flourish is not going to tell you what you should be doing. Fire to Flourish is going to help you to have a conversation about what you need and ask people what they need and be responsive to that because of our model of listening, of foregrounding Aboriginal ways of knowing and being, and of putting the community in the driver's seat. And that extends to the way in which we distribute the funding. And so this is exactly what we've been doing. We've been bringing community members together to have conversations about what worked well in that bushfire event and what didn't work well. I should say we're not interested in picking apart the suppression. That RFS does their own reviews. That's great. That's not what we're interested in so much as what was the community's engagement in risk reduction, what was the community's engagement in preparedness and response and recovery, and what was their agency and their leadership. And so on Saturday, we are bringing a group of community members together again, and we're going to share with them what we've heard from them about what worked well, what needs to be improved for the future. And that will form the basis of our reports. So for me as a researcher, that turns the whole thing on its head in the best possible way. You know, instead of us coming in and analysing and figuring out and making recommendations, our role is to support the community to figure out for itself what it wants to do and make their own conclusions. And then we'll have participatory granting funding to support projects that will go towards meeting those priorities. Okay, I've rambled enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Adriana. Yeah, I think that's a really lovely moment of impact to highlight. Obviously, the Fire to Flourish is kind of based on this interwoven community action and research to support community-led action. And the setting the foundations as we have over the last number of years has been a really slow process to build trust, to explain the role that research can play, and to really, I suppose, demonstrate in how we show up that research can be a bit of a service to community. And the fact that you then, after a number of years now, having community members asking for us to undertake a bushfire learning review to support their own evaluation of what worked and didn't work in their space for their own shared learning, I think is a really wonderful demonstration that we've kind of gotten to a really nice place where there is that symbiotic relationship. So that's wonderful. So I think you would have gotten a sense from all three of our panelists that participatory granting is a really key strand of the program. There's significant funding that's being distributed according to participatory granting principles in each of our communities that really has a strong focus on transferring decision-making to community members to make funding decisions about what projects to allocate and what projects to implement in their place for that collective disaster resilience building. So it'd be great to hear both from yourselves, Kizzy and Pamela, about the participatory granting processes. There've been a couple of grant rounds now in each of your communities. And I suppose at a macro level, what do you see as the benefits of a participatory granting approach? Recognising that you've both had experience with more traditional granting as well. What do you see as the merits of going down that participatory granting pathway? Maybe Pamela, we'll kick off with you.
Well, the merit is, so traditionally what happens is an organisation or an entity will put up some money for funding, and so they'll just kind of advertise it in their different ways, and interested community groups or individuals will apply. Whereas this is in participatory granting, such as we've been doing, is we've been engaging the community with a number of community engagement activities. And then up here in the Clarence, we've had two basic types. One is what we call co-design, where we've had key people come together from a particular district or area in the Clarence Valley and undergo a sort of like a deep listening process of 2.5 months, generally speaking, and then do a call out for project proposals. And then that group of individuals works out how they're going to make the decisions for funding allocation and then make those funding allocations. So they are the people actually doing it. And then the other way we've had is the placemaking participatory granting, where we've had a design studio in the community, where interested people have come together and gone through a process with the Monash arts and architecture students to distill, to have a conversation with each other about what they think about key places in our community and how they can be better improved for disaster resilience and for better usage down the track. And then from that go to call out for project proposals, and then the community itself decides on, and the community actually decided how it was going to decide before that, which was for us, we did a secret ballot, preferential voting 1 to 5. And then we posted the results so that people could see the nuance. So yeah, and both processes have been very much enjoyed. In fact, every time we do the co-design, so we're just about to do another co-design round, number 4, every time the people say, can we do it again? And they wouldn't say that if they didn't learn and enjoy from it. They've gone, oh, I really would love to have another go at that. Like, it's sort of like, now let's have a go at it, because it's so satisfying listening to the different stories and undergoing that process, understanding the needs of the community across the domains, the different focuses and the lenses. And the interesting thing in every instance, so I'm a community facilitator, and we've been doing lots and lots of work. In every instance, when you get to the community deciding, or the community members or leaders, key people deciding, everybody is invested in all the projects. They see the value in all the projects. It's just simply a matter of, this is how much money we've got. All the projects to get to that decision-making process have to be ready to go. So we're not sort of doing airy-fairy sort of stuff. It's very real delivery. And so, and I'm a professional artist, and we are very competitive when we go for the grants. We have to be. It's our living. That's why I'm sort of really interested in all of this. And the huge difference is that participatory granting is a collaborative process. It's not a competitive one. And it's for the greater good. And it engages both the old hands and the new, and not everybody in bushland communities wants to get involved in community life, but some people do, and they see the value in it, and the impact of it. And for those folk, it just makes, it puts oil through the wheels. It lets the cogs turn. It makes things fluent. Things that can, there's a reason why people don't get involved in community stuff, because it's so difficult and it's so messy. Whereas by listening to the voices of of people and finding out and becoming more sympathetic to the needs, the diverse needs, we're a very diverse community wherever we are, becoming more aware of what's going on for people makes some things really obvious. Like, it's really obvious we need a water tank there, or it's really obvious we need to engage our young people because we don't see them, they disappear and then they get lost, like it becomes really obvious, and everybody becomes everybody, the magical everybody. Those people that care to become involved, become invested, and it makes it possible, and that makes more things possible. It's really good.
Thanks, Pamela. We're getting some questions through the chat on the granting, which I'll come to in a moment, but maybe we'll just go to you next, Kizzy, just to share some insights, I suppose, about the participatory granting and how that's unfolded in Eurobodalla, and the benefits you see in that more community-driven process.
Thanks, Lara. We've been through a similar process to Pamela with the co-design process. That was our initial test and learn process, and we had participants from Walliga Lake in the south to Durras in the north to be a part of that process, and we funded 9 projects out of that were very successful, and most of them have come to completion this year. Then we've also had a process of an open granting round for community to apply for different projects. And I feel like it gives community a voice to support each other and create resilience as a collective within the community. And people, when that happens, people know who to turn to and who they can trust to to be leaders in their own recovery, and because they have the expertise and the skills to be able to build stronger, more confident communities, we need to build those experiences with community, so that, you know, they do know who to turn to and they do know who they can trust, and it strengthens the networks that we have. Also, I think that's what's really important with having people on the ground who are community members, is that we understand things that come up. It's not just ringing somebody because you have a problem and they don't understand your issue. It could be the weather. It could be a myriad of things that people who don't live in your community don't understand, and there are roadblocks that are then placed in the way. Whereas if people are on the ground and they understand those things, they understand that it's rained for 2 weeks, or, you know, and any number of things that happen, like sorry business or things like that that do come up, people on the ground within the community understand that and can be flexible. We can be flexible around the delivery of the project then. So the benefits of having local people who understand the issues has a big impact on how those projects are run and completed, and the amount of people who come to them, all of those kinds of things. So I think that now it's really important to have local people with local knowledge on the ground.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. I know we've got a couple of questions there around the granting and the kind of governance around that. So I thought I might just share some of how we've approached that in Fire to Flourish. So you might already have a sense that we've undertaken a number of grant processes in the various communities. We have deliberately started quite small as we were piloting different approaches, and it expanded out as the program has established itself more and more in each community. And that expansion and broadening and reaching more deeply across communities will continue to unfold over the coming months and into the remainder of the program. In terms of reporting and accountability around participatory granting, it comes up quite a bit. The program's approach has been really not to take one set approach. So the reporting and accountability processes changes for each granting round, and the particular processes that are put in place is determined in consultation with community. In broad terms, though, we've got 2 components. So the one is around the reporting back that's needed by the program and our community foundation partners. And the other, which is really our stronger focus, is around reporting back to the broader community and accountability to the broader community that is really the ultimate beneficiary of these projects. So in all cases, the reporting is really focused on sharing back the story of how the project unfolded. You know, what activities were undertaken, how many people did it reach, what capabilities did it build? You know, where was the money spent is certainly a component of that. But we're not really after a dollar for dollar accounting of what money was spent on, more as part of the broader story about what was important to support the implementation of this project. And so in some grant rounds, this reporting has been via a form. More recently, we're seeing communities are opting to hold celebration events in their community that bring people together, and then there's a sharing of the project and the community impacts. We've also used interviews with grant recipients and having learning circles that bring people together for that shared process of reflection and learning. So we have no set model really on purpose, which is aligned to the broader Fire to Flourish approach around deliberately experimenting with different models to test overall fit and effectiveness. And we're really keen to continue this experimentation and be demonstrating value and efficacy in different ways, and being able to come up with a suite of, you know, reporting and accountability processes that might be suitable in different contexts. So I might I hope that answers some of the questions. It's certainly a juicy topic with a lot more to share, but keeping an eye on the time, I might just move back to Adriana to do a bit of a deeper dive around I suppose getting your thoughts on how you've found the experience of working with community members as co-researchers, and what are some insights about that academic lived experience combination that really stands out to you.
Sure, thank you. Look, the first thing I would say about that is that community members are fantastic co-researchers. They are some of the best colleagues I could ever ask for. And so there's a huge amount of benefits to it. And I think at a fundamental level, when we talk about what we call applied research, which is research that is about the real world and is designed to or wants to make an impact, a positive impact on the real world, then working with community members with that deep mutual respect for everyone's knowledge and insights. That's the only way to go if we want to do applied research and we want it to have an impact, because otherwise it's just more sitting outside, and it doesn't matter how good the conclusions are actually or how right they might be. If they haven't been developed with community members and with local community-based organisations, then they're not owned and they're not going to be used, and they're not going to change anything, so they're not going to have an impact. And, you know, as a researcher, I've obviously learnt a huge amount from my community-based co-researchers, but I think also that they learn from us. So it is a two-way street. And what we get out of it in the end is so much bigger and better and more impactful than either group could have done without the other. I mean, the word synergy comes to mind.
Yep.
And, you know, I think the other thing I want to reflect on is that doing this sort of work requires change and that responsibility to change is very much on the shoulders of the researchers. So we need to, as individual researchers, we need to develop different skills. We need to expand our skills, ways of working. We need to be flexible and willing to feel like the novice in the room rather than the expert. I mean, that's super important to come at it from that and to expand our view of what a researcher's skill set and expertise is. So that needs to be expanded. And universities who want to do this work also have to have different modes of working. They have to recognise different impacts and different skills, and create the space for community members to really be full partners in the research process. But it is incredibly rewarding, and I wouldn't do research any other way.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm kind of trying to weave in some of the questions that are coming up around, they're coming in through the chat. And so there's a question really around how work that we've undertaken to reach particular cohorts in community. I might start by throwing to you, Kizzy. I know you've recently hosted an Indigenous leaders gathering. It'd be great if you could kind of share a little bit more about that.
Yep. Thanks, Lyra. To honour our program principle of foregrounding Indigenous wisdom and knowledge, we created a safe space for Indigenous leaders to come together in March, so they could discuss disaster resilience, share their stories, and support their healing as well, and to give them a voice that informs our process as we move forward into a new funding stage. We took a strategic approach where we did invite people from the southern end to the northern end of the Eurobodalla who are leaders in their own right within the community. They're leaders in caring for country, health and well-being, cultural practitioners, land management, as well as elders and youth. We had a diverse cohort that included people from all of those practices, and we came together to work towards identifying their priorities for preparedness, recovery, and resilience from an Indigenous perspective, as well as caring for country and health and well-being. And to give Indigenous people that space, you know, some people were very appreciative of it because they hadn't even regarded themselves as leaders within the community, but other people see them as such. And so we invited those people to come in because their thoughts and ideas are valuable to inform the process that we're trying to do moving forward. And from this gathering, we have an Our Country in Healing Hands funding round that we've just put EOIs out for last week, and have got a strong a lot of people are really interested in it, to be honest. We've had about 15 inquiries just over the last couple of days, so lots of people interested in it. And we were initially going to do a health and wellbeing round and a caring for country round, but sort of felt that it went hand in hand with each other. So we've combined it, and this was these reflections came from the gathering that we did have, and we have just recently started to put together a cohort of community project mentors that we've asked people from the community to put in an expression of interest for, to sort of do a different approach to the co-design round, where we're getting project mentors who are people within community who have run projects, who are able to help people who haven't had experience in applying for funding, those grassroots people who have got the really great ideas but haven't really had the experience of applying for funding before. So bringing on project mentors to help them develop the concept into a program that they are able to run in community. And these all bits and pieces all came from the leaders gathering that we had.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Kizzy. So great to be able to create dedicated spaces for different cohorts to come together for that shared reflection, sharing experiences, but then to be able to have the opportunity to take insights and momentum from these gatherings forward into project ideas and other initiatives for the community is really great. And that, I suppose, reflects a broader program principle of Fire to Flourish, which is around addressing inequities and enhancing inclusion. And that effort, I suppose, to be reaching out, particularly to different cohorts that might not see themselves as leaders, that might not always participate in community activities, or have their own, unique experience that need some particular scaffolding and support, has really been a bit of a red thread through the program. And so working particularly through our locally based staff has been really critical in order to really identify those gaps. Where are the people that fall through the cracks perhaps, or don't access support that might otherwise be available, and to try and bring these people and individuals in a little bit into the program and for the shared benefit of the community. So we've had a whole number of Indigenous led processes and Indigenous only spaces and initiatives in each of the programs. There's a number of Indigenous led activity projects that have been funded. Similar young people and youth that also we see have a particular experience, having lived through these bushfires, and a particular need to come together in their own space. So there's been a number of youth led projects as well that create that safe space for young people in communities to come together to think about their future and what they need in their spaces, and working through our local teams and with other local agencies and service providers on the ground to connect up with other vulnerable or marginalised cohorts. So I'm mindful we're approaching time. I'm wondering, there's another question which we've touched on a little bit, but perhaps, Pamela, was there anything you wanted to say around the rapid response grants and how, and that process for you, having gone through that recently in Boyda?
Yes, I'd have to endorse or some of the things that made that important, that made that important. So you've got to sort of like, well, there'll be too many people in the webinar that would be very familiar with this space, but it's sort of like, oh God, here we go again. and the energy of the whole time, whereas you really got your hands full dealing with your own stuff, but understanding that collectively. So what I'm trying to say is it was very, very useful having someone on the outside who was familiar with the community, which was our senior team lead, Roxanne. So this was an ordeal that went 4 days, and she contacted me very early, like during it, to say, look, we're about to initiate the financial relief fund, and just sort of ran a few markers past me and going, does that sit well with what you think you guys will be needing? And I went, oh, absolutely, that's absolutely fantastic. And rather than it being like a broad open question, what do you want or what do you need, she sort of like made contact with me going, okay, well, look, because she was familiar with the community, but also familiar with working in the disaster space, like she knew it was that experience that made it really easy for us that were caught in this bubble dealing with the whole shebang to interact, because otherwise it's just too much. The same with the water cartage. One of the reasons why the fire like flared up, and besides the blistering wind and all the rest, is that everything had dried out. And so people were fighting the fire or getting ready for the fire because it was a messy, sloppy wind. It was dropping embers all over the place, and you really didn't know where it was going to come up next. So people were preparing by using their remaining waters to water stuff down, which meant that they were they'd exhausting their water supply. So I think it was the next day Roxanne made contact with me again and said, listen, it occurs to us that you might need the water carter. And I'm going, that's a really good idea. Yes, we would. And she said, right, we'll leave it with me. And away it went. So the takeaway to that is, as opposed to an outside agency, and bless them all, like, sending us 600 teddy bears for the young people in our district where we don't have 600 young people. Like, it was that knowledge, that lived experience, and that relationship. Like, I understood who Roxanne was, and she knew what I was, and obviously my capacity was very limited. But I would so recommend that as a model, and we are doing it with the different disaster community networks that are emerging as a response to the rolling climate catastrophes that keep on rolling through our landscape. But the importance of building those networks, and that's what I think what Fire to Flourish is doing, is being able to demonstrate just how effective and efficient that is, because it means that key workers within the community itself, we've got our hands full, but we know that we can access that network so that things are instigated, and the Northern Rivers Community Foundation, the mechanism was there to disperse the money. Like, scaffolding is the word. The scaffolding was there to respond, to allow it to happen. But the scaffolding can't be imposed on us from outside. It has to emerge up. And so it's emerging up within the different communities, but our networks, it's a very organic process, and it's connecting up with others, and so on and so forth. I've probably again rambled on, but I'm just trying to explain how, if someone out of the blue that I didn't know rang me up from an agency and said, we're here to help, what can we do? I would have just gone, oh, call me tomorrow. Like, not now, but someone I knew had an informed input, was then able to take care of it, and I could trust them to do it. So it comes back to trust as well.
Yes,
so I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of a insight. So whilst I was super, super pissed off that we got taken out by a fire again, I'm really just amazed, and it's made a big difference in our community because we've just managed to step up and back up so much quicker and easier. It's still devastating, and I'm not trying to belittle any of the loss, but when I compare what happened in November and December and everything else compared to what happened in 2019-20, and of course it was a much bigger area, but there's a significant improvement, I've got to say.
Thanks, Pamela. Yeah, it really speaks to the importance of that proactive work to be building that social capital, those community networks, leadership that can then be really relied upon in difficult times. So I'm mindful we're really approaching time. I've got one final question that's come through the Q&A that I'm keen to address, which is a really incisive question around how we're going beyond writing reports to directly engage in systems influencing work. Thanks, Sam, for that question. It's certainly a really front of mind one for Fire to Flourish. We've existed, our kind of program design has really always tried to straddle that hyper-local place-based work with broader system change. So we're really, particularly now having done a few years of work, building the foundation in community, building the scaffolding of the program, having had the opportunity to do, a year odd of really active work in communities, and now have insights that we can share and I think meaningfully contribute to shifting and shaping dialogue and practice in the broader sector. So we're really focused beyond the reports, of course, of sharing our approach and insights widely. We're one of many players in this space and certainly not interested in duplicating efforts, but have been able to do a whole lot of experimentation and piloting and testing out of different approaches that's coupled with the evaluation of the research that underpins it. And so with that have some experience that we think might be valuable, and to be able to share these reflections and insights with others, which we're doing in a really targeted way. So target engagement with different stakeholders who all play a different role in the space, and really starting now to focus our conversations on what could it be like to scale some of these approaches. So we're really mindful. We've done some great work in 4 locations, but there's, as we heard from Senator Sheldon earlier, there's so many Australian communities that are affected by disasters, even in the last 4 months alone. So there's really a need for spreading and scaling work and methods and tools that can really support communities to lead their own disaster preparedness and then their recovery and longer term resilience building when disaster strikes. And so we're really keen to be having these conversations with others around how can we combine our approaches with insights and experiences from others to really share and scale these insights. And we're mindful of producing, outputs and doing this engagement in a really targeted way. And within that also wanting to create a platform for communities to speak for themselves. We kind of think that's a really key part of the puzzle, and we certainly don't need to be speaking on behalf of people. We've got community members and partners with plenty of insight and lived experience of their own that is a really critical piece of the puzzle that isn't often heard. So being able to provide a platform that connects community voice up with agency decision makers and other organisations so that people can really share their own experience and the needs that they have is really another focus for us in terms of that broader system influencing over the coming months and years of the program. With that, I might thank our panelists for sharing your insights and experiences. It's been really wonderful to hear your reflections. Certainly much more of the conversation that we could have had. So we look forward to engaging with audience members and other questions as time unfolds. But with that, I might hand back over to Bryony just for a final thank you and wrap up.
Thanks so much, Lara, Pamela, Kizzy and Adriana. It's always wonderful to hear your reflections and ideas and thoughts and experiences. And yeah, particularly, Pamela and Kizzy are 2 of our large suite of community team members, and you guys just do such an amazing job on the ground in supporting your communities. So heartfelt thank you to the work that you do, because I know it's not easy. Like the kind of questions and comments that are coming through in the chat, really, I think reflecting the complexity, in a community space. What do we even mean by community? How do we support diverse people to come and get involved in processes? How does grassroots community action and leadership interface with established organisations and local governments on the ground. You know, one of the comments is that governance is not sexy. That's true, but it's really important around how do we help all of these different voices and priorities come together in really meaningful, safe and effective ways. And so thank you to the community staff on the ground that are navigating that complexity and wearing the multiple hats of community member, Fire to Flourish representative, and so on. I also will just reiterate my thank you to our program partners. It's quite a journey as a program. We're really proud of where we've gotten to in this midpoint of our active community-led work. And it's a real collective effort in bringing this together. And I hope that you've enjoyed hearing some snapshots and bits and pieces of what we've been doing, and really look forward to deepening the conversations with all sorts of groups and organisations and people over the coming 6 and 12 and 18 months as we continue our work. We will try and, with the questions that weren't answered, we'll try and jot down a few notes and send around a few responses so that people have that opportunity to have their questions addressed as well. With that, I will finish. Thank you all for joining us today. Please reach out. We love to continue the conversation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.